very warm welcome to everybody joining us tonight. Welcome to Own the Room. We're going to get started very shortly. Just going to give everyone a chance to get logged on, get onto the call. We'll be starting very shortly. Good evening to everybody who has just joined. Welcome to Own the Room. Tonight, we're going to be exploring how your child can power up their public speaking and the importance of this vital skill. Tonight, we are joined by leading expert James Evans. James is director and lead public speaking coach of Vensa Coaching and one of the fantastic industry executives heading up our programs here at InvestIN Education. I also just want to take a moment to extend a huge thank you to the student experience team, without whom tonight would not be possible, and in particular to Amy, Emily, and Alicia, who are all working behind the scenes tonight to ensure that everything runs nice and smoothly. To provide just a little bit of background, tonight's event is part of our Success Beyond School series, where we are holding free regular webinars throughout the year directly for you, our parents. Now, for those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Chloe Lorenzi, and I am one of our student experience managers here at InvestIN. And I just want to say, I'm absolutely blown away to see so many parents joining us this evening, joining us from across the globe. It's absolutely fantastic to have you here, and we'll be coming to you directly for your questions later on this evening. Now, some of you may have already heard of InvestIN before, but for those of you who are less familiar with us, I just want to tell you a little bit about ourselves and what we do. So we were founded in 2012, the main aim to bridge the gap between school and the workplace. We provide immersive career experiences for students aged 12 to 18 across a range of 20 careers. So there's really something for all interests. There are several key areas that we cover on our career experience programs, including knowledge, experience, advantage, and network. We have worked with over 45,000 students from over 100 countries so far, building a truly global cohort of students and industry executives. We've worked with 4,000 schools and are very proud to report that we have an average Trustpilot score of 4.9 out of 5. Which is just such a testament to the fantastic experience that our students have on our programs. Now, a very important element of our programs is interactivity, and we wanted to give you just a little flavour of that this evening. So if everybody can please head over to Slido, that's slido.do, and if you can enter in the hashtag #OwnTheRoom, and from here you'll be able to submit your questions for our Q&A panel a little bit later on. And you'll also be able to take part in the live polls that we'll be launching throughout tonight's event. So we're going to go ahead and launch our first poll. And what we would please like to know is, where are you joining us from this evening? Where in the world are you right now? And whilst everybody is just getting logged into Slido, I just want to reassure everyone that you will receive a recording of tonight's event. So please don't worry if there are any parts that you miss. So I can see we shared the results now. Wow, London, Amsterdam, amazing. Cyprus, wow. Mexico, lovely. Madrid, very nice. Plymouth, fantastic. Dubai, incredible. Just so many countries. It's great to have you all joining us from across the world. Amazing, and we're very happy to have you here. Now, let's speak a little bit about why we are all here tonight. The importance of public speaking in the professional world cannot be denied, and this is the world that your children will be entering in just a few short years. Many of us are uncomfortable at the thought of public speaking, and this certainly includes our children. 90% of university students wish they had classes in public speaking, and over 50% report fearing presenting. This is in conjunction with 70% of all jobs which require some form of public speaking. And I can certainly say that public speaking and verbal communication skills are an essential part of my role and something I need to draw upon on a daily basis. 9 in 10 hiring managers look for strong public speaking skills in graduates, further cementing how important this skill is when it comes to breaking into the graduate jobs market. And of course, public speaking is not only required in person today, but also in a virtual remote working setting. There is no denying the extent to which COVID-19 has truly shaken up the way in which we work, and our children are now required to adapt to a hybrid in-person and online setting. Now, you may be understandably concerned about how the pandemic has affected your child's ability to pick up this key skill, particularly having only just returned to in-person teaching and restrictions in classrooms remaining still pretty tight. And this is why we're so glad that you're here tonight, because here at InvestIN, public speaking is an integral part of our programs. This summer, we are incredibly proud to be offering work experience opportunities across a range of 12 careers. Now, before I say too much, I'm going to go ahead and play a short video which will hopefully give you a little flavour of what our past alumni students got up to during our summer internships. Wow, I've seen that video a couple of times now, and every single time I'm just equally blown away by the fantastic opportunities that we are able to offer our students. Now, I'd love to introduce the professionals that we have joining us tonight. I've already mentioned James. James is Director and Lead Public Speaking Coach of Vensa Coaching, and he's going to be leading the main presentation this evening. I'll be handing over to him shortly. We also have Ella Podmore, who is Lead Materials Engineer for McLaren and also one of the key professionals on our Young Engineer programs and internships. We also have Anushka Pachwava. Anushka is Deputy Chief Medical Officer at Vitality. Anushka is a customer-focused strategist and qualified medical doctor with 10+ years clinical and corporate experience. And finally, we have Reese Rosser. Reese is a barrister at 2 Bedford Row with experience both prosecuting and defending in the Crown and Magistrates Courts. A huge thank you to each of our industry executives. We're incredibly excited to draw upon such expertise this evening. So I'm now going to hand over to James. James, I wonder if you would be able to turn on your camera.
Good evening. Do you read me, Chloe?
I do read you, James. How are you this evening?
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I can't wait to get started. And I wanted to start this evening with a question using that Slido tool. I want to know when you feel nervous about public speaking or presenting as parents. So there should be a few options appearing on the screen now. Are you never nervous about public speaking or presenting? Sometimes. Are you occasionally nervous about public speaking or presenting? A lot of the time, or indeed all of the time, whenever you're asked to speak or present, you're filled with nerves and anxiety, as so many people are. I'd love for you to vote now so we can see how people in the room feel about this crucial skill that Chloe has outlined so well. So we've got a few votes coming in, 77, 84. Wow, okay, you're really going for this. I'm really intrigued to see what results we're going to have. we could bring those up on screen now. Sometimes, always, occasionally, always. Okay, so quite a lot, yeah. So a lot of you are feeling nervous quite regularly. And if you're feeling like that, imagine how your kids are feeling about all eyes being on them when they're already self-conscious at that time in their life. They are going to be feeling it. They are going to be sweating at the idea of public speaking and presenting. So I want to give you a few different tools, techniques, tips for approaching this issue, this challenge, this skill with your children. So if I could have the next slide, please, because I'm going to start with my golden rule, which should be on the next slide. And this is really important. Way too often we are stuck in our own heads when it comes to public speaking, when it comes to presenting. And really what we want to do and what we want to encourage our children to do is get out of their own heads when it comes to public speaking and presenting, and make things far less about them and far more about their audiences. So what we want to do is ask them questions like, who are you going to be speaking to? What do they need from you today? So that they're not asking those same questions, how do I look? How do I sound? How are they going to judge me? That we all sometimes struggle with ahead of speaking and presenting. So my takeaway here is to start asking them to think more about their audiences for two main reasons. One, this is what their audiences actually judge them on. Okay, if you're sitting in the audience right now thinking, is this useful? Is this valuable? If your child can tick that box, give the audience something they need, then they're 90% of the way there. The audience aren't going, how many ums, how many ers, you know, is that person tripping up? They're going, is this useful? And if your child can give them something useful, then they are 90% of the way there. The other reason that this is such an important rule, that focus on the audience, is eventually if they do it enough, it's going to shift some of that pressure off of them. They're not going to be so stuck in their own head. They're not going to be thinking, how do I look? How do I sound? Are these people judging me? They're thinking, how do I engage with that person? How do I make sure that person has what they need? And that can be really valuable in dealing with those nerves, those anxieties. So putting that focus on the audience. And if I could have the next slide, please, Chloe. Okay, the next thing we want to deal with is this idea of making mistakes. This is a particular anxiety that people encounter when thinking about public speaking and presenting, this idea of getting things wrong, tripping over their words, freezing up, the presentation going wrong, the internet dropping out. All of these things people are worried about before speaking and presenting, and it's doubly so for your children who are already in their own heads in the first instance. Now, what we want to do is reassure our children, and the temptation is to reassure them by saying, you won't make a mistake, we'll practice, we'll make sure that you're perfect and you'll be fine, you'll be great, you will be perfect going in there. But that's really the wrong way to go about this, because over the course of their speaking career, they will make mistakes, right? They will fumble over their words occasionally. They will forget things. The more they speak, the more likely that is to happen. It's just a law of averages. And there'll be some things that go wrong that won't even be within their power. The projector may cut out. The internet connection may stutter. And we need to get them used to the idea that these things happen, but they're not the end of the world. All we need is a strategy for dealing with them. And that strategy is this. If you make a mistake and the audience notice, you take a break, you take a breath, you acknowledge the mistake, you laugh about it, and you move on. You say, completely forgotten what I was going to say. Let me just check my notes. This went a lot better in the mirror this morning. There we go. And you know what? No one cares. No one in the audience cares. Life's too short. It's when you make a big deal out of that mistake, it's when you start panicking, that's when the audience start to feel awkward. That's when that tension starts to build in the room. Whereas if your child knows that a mistake might happen, they might make a mistake, but they can recover from it relatively easily by acknowledging it and maybe laughing about it, then they're not going to be so worried about the idea of making mistakes. Ironically, if you try to never, ever, ever make a mistake and you're really set on making sure everything runs perfectly, chances are you'll make more mistakes. So we want to introduce this idea that, you know, in public speaking and presenting, these things happen, but we can deal with them. So talk to your child about how to mess up and regain control in their presentations, in their public speaking. If I could have the next slide, please, Chloe. So we talked there briefly about this idea that you might try and get your child to prepare to the point where they don't make any mistakes, and that's an error. But we certainly want to help them prepare. Now, in many instances, the idea of giving a speech, of giving a presentation, can seem so overwhelming. It can seem like such a big task that your child will just try and put it off. They'll just try and run away from it altogether. Okay, so what you want to do is support them in this preparation. Okay, and a really useful thing to do is to break up that task. You say, okay, can we put an hour aside tomorrow night to do some brainstorming, to come up with some ideas for this speech? Can we put an hour aside the next night to build a basic structure around those ideas? This weekend, perhaps we can work on some bullet points, and we can try speaking to those bullet points and see how that goes. Okay, so it's breaking it up into stages that are manageable so that it's not this mammoth task and this terrifying ordeal. And then, of course, once that preparation is done, you want to get them rehearsing, and you want to get them rehearsing in the right way. And by that, I mean out loud. You know, way too many of my clients, my clients who are adults, who are executives, who really should know better, spend their time reading through their notes like this and think that constitutes a rehearsal. It doesn't, okay? When you are learning a speech, a presentation, you say it out loud. And if you're going to be saying it on Zoom, if you're going to be going through it on Zoom, you do so sitting in front of the laptop so that you get used to delivering it in that way. If you're going to be in front of a room full of people, you set out a space in your living room. You can do this with your child. You say, let's use that rug as your stage, okay? You use that space. You walk around as you would on the day. You hold the TV remote. You hold this glass. If you're going to have a microphone, you use it, okay? You emulate that setting as much as possible so that that child, when they actually come to that speaking opportunity, they feel like they've been through it before. They feel like they have some familiarity with what they're going to be dealing with in front of all of those people. That's really helpful. If you can break down the preparation and help your child rehearse in that way that emulates what they're going to be doing on the day, then they really will thank you for it. If we could have the next slide, please, Chloe. Now, this is a really important one, the importance of body language. If there's one thing I know about teenagers, it's that they like to slouch. They like to slouch over. And you can go into a room slouched over with your hands in your pockets and start speaking. But you are not going to project confidence. You are not going to project authority. You are not going to project gravitas. And we want to get our kids in the habit of doing these things as early as possible. The other thing is, if you're slouched over, you're actually compressing the diaphragm, which is a really important part of the body. It's a muscle just below the lungs that we use when speaking. So we want the kids to sit up straight. We want them to make the right impression before they even start speaking. Now, it can be quite difficult for a child to hear sit up straight or stand up straight and take that advice. So I found that a really good way of approaching this with younger clients is to talk about people they admire and how they hold themselves. Got photos there of Marcus Rashford and Greta Thunberg. You could start a conversation when one of those comes up on TV or your child starts talking about them. How do they how are they holding themselves there? How are they standing up? How are they speaking to that group of people? Is there something about the way that they're appearing that is making them look more powerful, more authoritative? It's a really good way of nudging them in the right direction. We've also got some pictures there of people showing up on webcam in two very different ways. Okay, we already know who is going to be the more authoritative speaker. You want to make sure that your child is showing up on webcam properly. They want to be centered the frame, taking up a good amount of space and eye level to the webcam. This is how they're going to start speaking with confidence and coming across with confidence and authority. Again, you can always say, how does that person that you were watching that video on the other day come across on webcam? How do they hold themselves? How does Marcus Rashford hold himself in those videos? It's a good way to nudge this. So if your child is slouching, if your child is not holding themselves with confidence, then talk to them about someone they admire and how they hold themselves and what it does. It's a really good way to broach this subject and to move your child in the right direction. And if we could have the next slide, please, Chloe. Now, last but not least, get them speaking. One of the biggest challenges that my clients face is they feel like public speaking and presenting is something really unfamiliar to them, something they're just not used to at all. They may have shied away from speaking opportunities, they may have delegated them, they may have just left the job that required speaking, to be quite honest. You know, there is sometimes that level of desperation to avoid speaking, and then suddenly they found that the job that they're going into also requires this skill. So a really good way of stopping your children from building this thing up to this big terrifying ordeal is to actually get them speaking at this young age and to create opportunities for them to speak in front of people they don't know that well. Because speaking in front of your class is one thing, speaking in front of your colleagues, as many of you will know, is one thing, but speaking in front of a group of strangers, that's really what they need to master. So drama groups, debate clubs, and of course, InvestIN courses, as Chloe said earlier, are a really good way to go with this. And I will just say, as someone who has spoken on InvestIN courses, they get so many opportunities to speak in front of a large group of people that they've never met before. And it's always a really supportive environment that they're speaking into, and a really enjoyable way for them to conquer this fear and to start building these skills. So the takeaway there is clearly to create opportunities for your child to speak in front of others outside of their class, outside of their school, outside of their peer group. And if I could have my final slide, please, Chloe, just to sum everything up. So number one, going back to that golden rule, make sure your child thinks about who they're talking to and what they need to hear. Try and shift that focus away from what's going on in their head to that all-important audience. Number two, I could have number two on the screen, please, Chloe. Talk to your child about how to mess up and regain control. Let them know that mistakes will happen. There will be things that go wrong in their speeches and their presentations over their speaking career. It might not be the next speech or presentation. It might be one a few days down the line, a few speaking opportunities down the line, but that's okay. They can acknowledge it, they can joke about it, take a breath, they can carry on. If I could have the third takeaway on the screen, please, Chloe, thank you so much. Break down the preparation, help them prepare those speeches or presentations in bite-sized chunks, and then get your child rehearsing right away and in the right way. Get them up, get them speaking. If they say, I'm going to my room to rehearse, and you walk past their room and you can't hear anything, then something has gone horribly wrong. They need to be speaking out loud and projecting and doing what they're going to do on the day. So number four, please, Chloe. If your child is slouching, talk to them about how someone they admire holds themselves. Make sure that you've looked up this person first to check that they are holding themselves confidently and with authority. But most public figures do. You know, that's no coincidence, right? So start having those conversations. That can be a really good way of introducing this idea of standing up straight, imagining that you've got that impossibly strong invisible thread holding you up, and really starting to show up with confidence and authority before you've even started speaking. And then finally, if we can have that last point, Chloe, last but not least, do create those opportunities to speak in front of others. And for me personally, one of the things I'm most grateful to my own mum for is that she put me into an amateur drama group from a very young age, and I had plenty of opportunities to speak in front of other people. So I never really built public speaking up to be this big scary thing that was only going to happen once in a blue moon. It was just part of my day-to-day. And then, as I say, another really great way of making it part of your child's day-to-day is an InvestIN course, where they'll also pick up that career experience and expertise and all of the networking. I would have jumped at the chance to go one of these courses as a kid, so do consider them. That is it from me for the time being. I will be taking your questions at the panel, but for the time being I will hand over to Chloe.
Thank you so much, James. That was fantastic. I know I was certainly making notes throughout, and I particularly enjoyed the part on making mistakes. Definitely found that very inspiring. So I'm just waiting for my next slide to load. And whilst I am, I just want to remind everybody that our Slido Q&A is open. That's slido, and you can input the hashtag #OwnTheRoom to submit your questions for our panel now. So I mentioned earlier this evening that we are offering summer internships this summer. And to give you just a little bit more information about these, we are offering up to 10 days of life-changing, immersive, super curricular experiences where your children will be able to experience life firsthand in their chosen career. And to provide just a few examples of what students will be getting up to on our summer internships, on our Young Doctor Summer Internship, students will be visiting a London teaching hospital where they will have the opportunity to shadow doctors, take blood samples, and learn how to stitch up wounds. And this is actually something that many students do not get the opportunity to do until their final years of university. So an incredible opportunity there. On our Young Engineer Summer Internship, students will have the incredible opportunity to visit a supercar studio and take apart a petrol engine under the supervision of a top mechanical engineer. And then another example is on our Young Filmmaker Summer Internship. They'll be using high-level equipment on a film set location to plan, direct, and film their first original movie scene. So just a little flavour there of some of the incredible opportunities available on our summer internships. And throughout the internship, students will receive expert coaching from industry executives, just like James, just like the panelists will be coming to in a moment's time. And these industry executives can actually become invaluable mentors for students even after the internship has ended. So some great networking opportunities there. We're incredibly proud to report that our summer internships did go ahead in 2020, and they received an average feedback score of 9.2 out of 10, which is such a clear indication of the incredible time our students had with us. And we were so proud to hear that feedback from them. Now you can see on the screen here, we've got the dates of the internships. We've also got the age ranges. So you've got ages 15 to 18, and then opportunities for ages 12 to 14. And I just want to take a moment to note that there is some urgency to this. We've experienced significant demand for our summer internships, particularly given how difficult it has been to secure in-person work experience in the current climate. You know, there's no denying that students and our children have had a tough time over the past year or so. Many of our internships are almost full, so we would advise registering as soon as you are able to. Now, if you do have any questions, please do get in touch with either myself or the rest of my colleagues on the student experience team will be incredibly happy to answer any questions that you've got and to provide any additional information on our summer internship opportunities. And we'll be sharing our contact details a little bit later on this evening, so please do stick around for that. So we're now going to head into the Q&A section of the event. So if our panelists can please turn on their cameras, microphones. Amazing, can see everybody has joined us. And I think it would be great to start off if we could just go around each of you, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and your experience with public speaking so far. So I guess, Anushka, I'd love to come over to you first.
Hi, Chloe. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I hope you've had a lovely Tuesday. It is Tuesday today. I am Deputy Chief Medical Officer at Vitality. My experience with public speaking is, I'd say, very broad. I started off as a doctor, shying away, not knowing how to talk to patients and what we would regard as our own colleagues and peers. Developed my, I guess, my acumen for speaking through conferences and presenting in large group environments, and then have since been mainly a public speaker on the conference circuit, dealing with the technology side. So I'm a thought leader, as they say, in blockchain and artificial intelligence technologies, and everyone wants to know the research and the practical elements of that these days. So I've done over 75 conferences last year, and included really great podcasts like the Forbes Futures in Focus podcast and such likes.
Amazing. Reese, head over to you next.
Hi everyone, I'm a criminal barrister at 2 Bedford Row. So my day job effectively is public speaking, doing jury trials or legal argument or whatever it may be. And it's very difficult to go through a day without something that includes public speaking in some way. And before I joined 2 Bedford Row, I was an investment banker at the Royal Bank of Scotland.
Amazing. Ella, head over to you next.
Hi everyone, I am the lead materials engineer for McLaren Automotive, the supercar company. And whilst it's not necessarily obvious where I use my public speaking, as a women in STEM position, which is science, technology, engineering and maths, I'm occurring with lots of different public speaking events, talking about women in these types of environments, talking about motorsport, and also as a spokesperson for McLaren as well.
Amazing. And then James, did you want to just give us a little bit more information about your day job and what you're doing?
Absolutely, I can keep talking until the cows come home. So as Chloe said earlier, I am the director and lead public speaking coach at my own company called Vensa Coaching. We help individuals and companies with their public speaking, their presentations, their pitches. We work with a real range of people from graduates to artists to executives. It's great fun watching people go from a little bit nervous, a little bit unsure of themselves to, really confident, captivating speakers. And it's another reason I love working with the young people on the InvestIN courses. It's really rewarding to see that change even over a couple of days. So that's me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for those introductions. Can see we've got a wealth of expertise to draw upon this evening. So we've had quite a few questions on kind of anxiety surrounding public speaking, and particularly what our parents can be doing to support their children who may be particularly anxious when it comes to speaking in public. So I wonder if you guys had any kind of tips or tricks for calming nerves before a big presentation or a big speech. I guess, Ella, let's start with you.
Oh, I think there are many things that you can try. I think for me, to get over anxiety before a large speech, it is preparation for me. And this is a point that James picked up on previously. So if I'm feeling well prepared, I will often have the nerves settle down, and then I'll feel ready to do the actual event. So make sure that you have everything together that you need, but then also just take a break before you're just about to go on stage or you step in front of your slides. I would have a little moment to yourself to get yourself back into the zone. I know people like to speak to you and ask you questions just before you go on, but take that moment to absolutely focus. And aside from that, all those points that James mentioned about making sure that you don't worry if you have a mistake. Firstly, I think that was such a crucial one. These things happen, just let it be natural, and get yourself in the right headspace. That would be mine, but it's not easy.
Amazing. I guess, Reese, any tips for the audience?
No, I totally agree with Ella. One of the things that we focus on the program is preparation. And one exercise we do is we look at varying different styles of public speaking, and discuss with students what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, who do you think is the better public speaker. And what's always interesting is the disagreement between people as to who, let's say if you took Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer, who is the better public speaker, because they have such different styles. And the point I'm making is that it's helping someone understand what their style is, because as soon as you understand that, then you actually become far more familiar with what you're presenting and how you're presenting it. And it's much less intimidating, much less frightening to go into a public speaking environment. And so it's effectively educating yourself or educating your students and your children's parents to understand themselves and to understand what their strengths are in the way they address an audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, Anushka, finally, did you have any other tips on calming nerves before a big presentation?
So I agree with everything my fellow panelists have said. I think the one thing I use to calm nerves is just remind myself of my authentic self. When you're speaking, you should be speaking on a subject that you're passionate about, you care about, you enjoy, or you're interested in. And I think parents, particularly on this call, please empower your children to explore speaking opportunities where they feel comfortable talking on the subject. That's so critical to building confidence. And I remember one of my stories, when I started medical school, I got asked to talk on a subject that was quite odd, Drosophila flies and how their genetics transpire. I wasn't interested in Drosophila flies. I wasn't interested in genetics. In fact, the only reason I signed up to go to medical school was because I realized that it was the medics that had the most fun at university. So it really didn't work for me. It shattered my confidence because I didn't know enough about the subject. And back in the day, we didn't really have access to Google as we did now. We do now. I'm not that old, but Google wasn't the first point of call. We had textbooks, physical textbooks, and I couldn't be bothered to pick up the big thick textbook and look up the chapter. And that really did shatter my confidence. And, had I had a mentor or a parent or someone empower me from a young age to talk on subjects that I liked and I enjoyed, and to be my authentic self, I would have developed those skills that are necessary to make public speaking habitual and not an anxious event. So I think the two areas I'd say is if your child and your students aren't curious about the subject matter, then they probably shouldn't be speaking on it. And if they can't be their authentic self and we don't empower them to be their authentic self, whether that is turning up in jeans or a hoodie or a full suit or walking while they talk or using their hands or nodding their head like I tend to do because I have my hands under my desk all the time, whatever it is, if we don't encourage those sort of behaviors, we don't get the uniqueness and the value that they bring out of, every individual brings out of public speaking. And I guess my third tip, I like doing things in threes, is TED Talks. TED Talks are so fascinating because you can notice and watch and see everyone else's styles and the way they use their voice and props, etc. So the two things I use for public speaking and to calm myself but also to train myself are watching lots of TED Talks, and a less conventional one is watching Comedy Central, because comedians for whatever reason always seem to own the stage and own the room.
Amazing. I love that. I love that, owning your authentic self. Such a great idea. And I guess kind of speaking about opportunities to practice public speaking, what sort of kind of extracurricular activities could our parents be suggesting to their children to practice these public speaking skills? I guess, James, start with you.
Yeah, well, whatever's at your disposal, really, beside the InvestIN courses, of course. I mentioned earlier, amateur dramatics really helped me to get in front of people on a regular basis. If you're in an AmDram group that's working towards putting on a performance, they will usually put on that performance 10, 11, 12 times. Even if you've got 2 lines in that, going in front of 12 different audiences night after night after night at a young age is really going to shake that fear of eyes, fear of being in front of people out of you pretty quickly. You're just not going to have the energy to be really nervous every single night after school as well. Any debate clubs, public speaking clubs, if there aren't these opportunities for your children, I would say, you know, look to create them. See if the child is interested in these things, if they can come together with their friends, if you can come together with other parents in your school, and suggest to the school that this is something that they would really benefit from. So certainly public speaking debate clubs, investing courses, any kind of online meetings, that there are so many where there are opportunities for them to ask their questions, to come on microphone, to come on camera and actually just speak, even if it's for a minute. So pretty much any extracurricular activity which involves talking is a good one to push them towards.
Nice. I love that. Just talk as much as you can.
Exactly. Get them speaking in front of unfamiliar people. That is what I would say again and again.
Amazing.
For me, Chloe, what I would say, being coming up through an engineering pathway, I found that tutoring and teaching actually gave me that confidence that Anushka was talking about. And I didn't really realize that before you guys were sort of saying that actually speaking about something that you know, speaking about something that you're passionate about to someone who probably doesn't understand it as well as you do, gives you that confidence, and build it up slowly. So I used to tutor. I now teach engineering courses to other engineers at McLaren, and that has definitely instilled some kind of confidence in a demographic that I thought I would be, you know, the most stupid person in the room sort of thing. So that's definitely built it up. And also start small. So when you're in smaller teaching groups, you can go larger. It isn't this thing where you have to step out on stage and I've got to learn how to public speak now. Think about it in classrooms. Group projects are very big indicators of when you're going to be an engineer. You're always working in a group, you're always communicating to a different type of engineering facility, whatever it may be. So build it up, ask for projects, ask for how you can present to class, and also team elements of it. So I was a big sportswoman at school, and just leading a team, learning how to communicate to them at half time is a little less stressful because you're all in it together sort of thing, but you're actually addressing a large body of people and you're in front of an audience, whether it be at a match day or whatever. So that would be my main tips.
I agree with Ella. I think James and Ella put forward some fantastic formal suggestions. My experience of learning to public speak was very much in the informal environment. And I think the parents on this call, take your children to conferences or events, and it's hard in this day and age, I know, because it's less in person, more virtual. Hopefully that changes. I remember accompanying my parents to most of their medical conferences, and for want of a better phrase, they role modeled that public speaking because they were on stage, and I got to watch them. And you know, encourage your children and your students to do that with their peers as well. Take them to events, and you know, someone's speaking at an event, let them go watch, let them feel, let them understand, let them see. Equally important, you know, taking on James' point, even letting them go to the theatre with you, even if it's a serious play or a musical, just having that sense of what that embodies is really critical, and starting young with that. The second area I think is, and I won't give you 3, I'm going to give you 2 this time, but the second area that I think is really important with them to explore is within their own peer group, because I think that's the platform for recognition that we all strive for. We are often threatened by those more senior and more knowledgeable than us, and we're often quite disengaged with those more junior. But when you're on peer group, how can you organize pitch nights? There's so many budding entrepreneurs, you know, instead of what traditionally would have been a sleepover and PlayStation, let's do a pitch night for your birthday, or let's do something different that encourages that skill set, that makes it not feel like work, but you're still getting them to work, if you know what I'm saying.
Absolutely. And I love that you've brought in this idea of being in a group setting, because we've had a question come through on Slido about how can more introverted personalities kind of assert their dominance and their place in a group when they're maybe surrounded by more extroverted, outgoing personalities. I wonder, Reese, if you had any thoughts on that.
I think it's always a challenge And it doesn't change with whatever age group you're dealing with. I mean, Ella may well agree that, I mean, I teach people on the postgrad barrister course now, and it's as difficult drawing out people who are introverted in that situation in comparison to those who are extroverted, and exactly the same as it is with those who are 12 to 14. So I imagine it may well be the same with Ella's engineering teaching. And the only way you can do it is to create opportunities. And whether that has to be in a structured environment such as the program, where you effectively put it in the hands of those running it to say, look, it becomes apparent very early, those who are willing to, and overly willing to put themselves forward in comparison to those who aren't. And it's those who aren't that end up getting, if anything, more focus because they get drawn out. And all you can do is create opportunities. That's what I'd say. You can't force it, but it happens naturally when someone introverted is in a group of their peers. Over time, they naturally come to the forefront. And by the end of, if it's a 5-day program, for example, you tend to see that everyone's on a much more level because they've had those opportunities, they've done it. There's no real fear anymore about saying something wrong or being embarrassed in some way. It's just, again, what we started with, practice and preparation and building those opportunities, which may well not be obvious, because some of the examples we've given as to how to get public speaking experience, how to find it, are perhaps not that obvious. I mean, I can see on the chat bar, even on the Zoom call, there's part-time job speaking one-to-one with customers. Great. They're not obvious examples of how you become better at public speaking or more experienced, but they're great and they're really underrated. And when it comes to employers considering things, that's the sort of thing that jumps out. And that's what puts people in a better position.
If I could just jump on something that Reece said earlier as well about different styles of public speaking. I think introverted people often worry because they're not bouncing around the stage and coming out to the audience, you know, in the same way that, you know, a much more extroverted speaker might. But I think it's really important to tell your child that there is a power in letting the audience come to you. There's a power in stillness, in speaking slowly, in drawing the audience in rather than going to them, and knowing that they can make a lot from their personality, their introvert, to pick up on what Anushka was saying earlier, actually about this very subject, which I would recommend watching if you do have an introverted child. But just reassuring them that, you know, just because they're a little bit shy or they're not that forthcoming in terms of jumping up on stage and speaking naturally, doesn't mean that there can't be a real power in the way that they speak. And it comes back again to that authenticity point that Anushka was making earlier. You know, not only do they need to be authentic in what they're talking about and their interest in that, but also how they're speaking. You can see a million miles away when someone has been trained in public speaking rather than coached, and the audience switch off when someone's being someone else or doing a bad impression of Steve Jobs or Michelle Obama when they're nothing like that person. So just reassuring that child that there is a power in what they're doing, but they do need to get out there and use it.
I agree. And one of the points I want to make is really around power, but also dispelling the myth that an introvert can't be a good public speaker or can't be successful or can't achieve X, Y, or Z or can't be the largest contributor in a room. I say that because I bet most people on this call think all of the presenters here are extroverts just because by nature we're here. I actually score significantly higher than the average on an introversion scale. And I've learned in my life how to recharge and discharge from energy. So, you know, I will not back-to-back my meetings, for example, to enable me to have my discharge and then to turn into my next meeting, you know, fully revived. So there are tools and techniques to help combat introversion, extroversion. But what I think is really important for parents to, again, communicate to their children is, it doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert or you're a mix of the both. Those labels aren't there to facilitate what you can or cannot do. And that's the powerful piece. As James said, the power comes from within you, and having control and maintaining authenticity and being able to do the things you want to do in a way you want to achieve them and do them. So I think that the dispel the myths around introverts can't speak up and can't, you know, communicate effectively and don't like, you know, are very shy. Actually, a lot of introverts aren't shy. They just choose to say things at the right moments. And some of the world's cleverest people, cleverest being a loose term, but you know, designed by nature by how much value they have, or you know, achievements they've made, be it Einstein or Jeff Bezos or even Elon Musk, are actually introverts as well. So I think using those examples to dispel myths are very, very, very critical parenting techniques.
I love that. I'm also an introvert myself. And one of my favorite quotes is "feel the fear and do it anyway." And I certainly think that applies when it comes to kind of public speaking and feeling particularly anxious about that. So love that conversation there. And I'm sure that will have been incredibly helpful for our parents. I know that, James, you were mentioning kind of making mistakes in your presentation, and we've discussed that a little bit in the panel. But what would you say are the common mistakes people make when they're practicing public speaking? What kind of traps can people fall into?
I've got loads of these. Would you like me to speak to this?
Yeah, James, start us off.
So, at the moment, a lot of meetings, a lot of presentations are taking place over Zoom, right? Including this very call that we're on now. And people will practice their presentations doing this. You know, walking around the room in order to get a rhythm, in order to get a flow, in order to dispel any adrenaline. And if you're doing that when you're rehearsing, when you're preparing, when you're getting ready, and then suddenly you've got to sit down in front of a laptop, that energy doesn't know where to go. You're not going to be able to get into the same rhythm. You're not going to be able to memorize things in the same way. So rehearsing in a way that doesn't emulate what you're going to be doing on the day is, I would say, the biggest mistake that people make. And again, not reading things out loud, not saying things out loud is another one. And finally, I would also say this idea that when you're rehearsing, you can just go at your own pace and you'll slow it down on the day. Never works, never works. Everyone goes too fast anyway. And if your rehearsal is, I'm just going through this and I'll definitely slow down on the day when I'm in front of all those people and that adrenaline is surging, then you're kidding yourself. So really making sure that your speed is right, that the setup is right, that everything is mimicking what you're going to be doing on the day is absolutely vital. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, amazing. Some great tips and tricks from you there, James. I guess, Ella, head over to you. Any thoughts on this?
On how to, sorry, can you repeat the question?
So kind of avoiding making mistakes when you're practicing your public speaking, or are there any particular things that you kind of do or that you don't do when you're getting ready for a big speech?
Oh, so yeah, it would definitely have to be preparation. I would always make sure that I am appearing well. So in the mirror, I would definitely practice, make sure that I'm constantly not flapping about with my hands, even though I'm still doing it now and stuff like that. But I would also be very prepared in the situation that I'm going into. So it's only through recently I've been doing lots of public speaking events, but I want to know how long it's going to be for, what the kind of audience are there for, what do they want to listen to, the number of people who are attending. These are the kind of things, if I'm very prepared, and not that I'm saying that I have to control every aspect of it, but if I know what I'm going up against, then I feel a lot calmer. And I think if I know that before I start prepping, immediately before, like James was saying, talking through my words, or maybe having some reminder cards with me and stuff like that, if I know what the audience is wanting to gain from this and how I can involve them at the earliest opportunity, again, another point James was saying, it's really good to keep that engagement, then I will feel a lot more confident. So don't be afraid if you are going to do a presentation, whether it be at work, whether it be with a project group or whatever, then to ask questions about who's going to be there and just to put yourself in the most prepped position you can be.
Amazing. Thank you, Ella. And we've had a question come through on Slido, which I think is particularly interesting, asking about being an effective member in an audience and actually how you can build your confidence to ask a question to a speaker and participate in public speaking in that way. I wonder, Reese, did you have any insights on being an effective audience member?
I never really get to be an audience member anymore, annoying. But I think it's going to come back to what we started with what Ella started with, and that's preparation. If you're going to a talk on a topic, then it's always good to read around it in advance. You're not necessarily giving yourself spoilers, you're just educating yourself to be able to take an informed approach to it, and then it becomes a two-way thing. And then all it comes down to is just raising your hand and asking a question. And I can guarantee that anybody giving a talk wherever will not turn around and say, that's a stupid question. Number one, because it won't be, but also because if there's ever a brilliant way to alienate your audience, it's to turn around and say, that's a stupid question. And people don't do it. So it's actually a really good question to ask and a really risk-free way of getting public speaking experience, because even if your question isn't quite right, I can guarantee you it will get manipulated to be relevant and right in the answer that's being given. So yeah, I think it's a great question. Absolutely recommend it. Again, prepare and maybe go in advance armed with some questions you'd like to ask.
Love that. I guess, Anushka, any thoughts from you on being a good audience member?
I think listening, because that's the reason why you're in the audience in the first place. And I think, I hate to repeat it again, but if you're curious about the subject and you're listening closely, there will be unanswered questions that you do have. I also think, again, dispelling the myth of I need to sound intelligent. I think Reese, you were touching on that just then. It's when you're asking a question, you don't need to sound intelligent. You're not there, you know, that's not your purpose. The reason you're asking the question is because you want to understand deeper or more, or fill your own curiosity. So try to shake that off, that I need to sound intelligent when I'm asking a question, and actually just be authentic and say, you know, I'm asking a question because I want to know more. And, you know, if you are really worried, and I've done this in the past, I've said, I just want to caveat this with, I might not have understood you the first time, so can I clarify? Or some sort of phrasing that softens the fact that, you know, you might not have the entire confidence you need behind the question you're asking. But I genuinely think listening, because I think a lot of questions are answered through listening, and a lot of questions are formulated through listening closely.
Amazing. Loved your response there, Anushka. Thank you. Now I want to ask the final question of this evening. So just very short and sweet from each of you. If you could go back and give your 15-year-old self one piece of advice with regards to public speaking, what would it be? I guess, Reese, let's start with you.
I think it would probably be less confident, because I saw someone ask, is it possible to stop being too confident without looking arrogant? And on reflection, when I started public speaking, I probably was a bit arrogant. And I guess that comes down to knowing your weaknesses is the takeaway. And again, that's something that comes with practice, and something that comes with watching yourself back. So yeah, be less confident. You don't know everything.
Love that. Ella, throwing it over to you.
I think it would have to be that piece of advice that everyone keeps talking about at the moment, and that's find your individual style, be yourself. And in an industry where I am working in a workplace where it's very male dominated, I think it took me quite a long time to realize this, that yes, I was fortunate to have these public speaking events, but I thought I had to be a really tough, masculine, shouty person on stage to match the stigma and the stereotype that an engineer has in an automotive world. But as soon as I was able to break through that and think, oh, actually, I'm actually just talking to a load of people, I can be myself. I want to show them what my job is and how I'm passionate, and I can't do that if I'm being this shouty person. So it's really, really true. You have to be your own individual self, and it will shine through, and you will feel more confident, and people will listen to you because that is who you are. You're not trying to do this facade and put on a show. It'll become more easy.
Amazing. Before I head over to James and Anushka for your answers, I just want to let everybody know that we have launched the feedback survey for for tonight's event. Please let us know what you enjoyed and what you'd like to see more from InvestIN in the future. We'd really appreciate your responses there. So I guess, James, throwing it over to you.
So what advice would I have given to my 15-year-old self regarding public speaking? I think I suffered from the same thing as Reese for a little while. I was maybe a little bit arrogant as a speaker, and I think I was in broadcast mode a lot of the time. I put on a show, right? And I think the advice that I would give to myself is actually engage with your audiences a little more, ask them questions, speak to them, listen to them. The listening has been such an important part of our conversation today, and it's a really important part of public speaking. If you want to give the audience what they need, you need to listen to what it is they need. Listen more, engage with the room more, and respond on that basis. I think that would have helped me leap ahead with my public speaking much more quickly.
Thank you, James. And last but not least, Anushka, what advice are you giving your 15-year-old self?
I'm going to let out a sigh of relief that none of you said what I wanted to say, because I only had one thing I wanted to say. My advice to my 15-year-old self on public speaking would be ask for feedback, because I think there's two areas where that's important. I think throughout your life, if you have that fear of feedback, you'll never be able to improve, progress, augment, develop, and learn. And it's so critical that we condition children and anyone from a young age to not fear feedback and be able to ask for it, to be able to process it, to be able to synthesize it, to be able to discuss it with those around them, and then to be able to use that as a platform and a catalyst towards learning. So that would be my first piece. And the second piece around asking for feedback is also because it's very, very hard to watch yourself back or to listen to yourself. And it's quite emotionally distressing for some people, including me. So by asking for feedback from those that you trust, you can develop a mentorship relationship with them. And I know someone in the chat has just, forgive me, I didn't catch your name, but I know you were asking about having a mentor. I think a mentor is very, very important, and not necessarily just one mentor, but a mentor that fulfills whatever need it is that your child has. It could be a mentor around, career. It could be a mentor around, mental well-being. It could be a mentor around any of the struggles that, today's generation experience. So I think if you don't ask for feedback, you have a fear. And if you ask for feedback, you're conditioning yourself for the rest of your life that tough conversations happen. And, by asking for feedback early, you can break habits. One of my habits was I always used to play with my nose when I spoke. Without realizing, so I'd be on the phone and I'd play with my nose. Always had a red nose. It's probably a reason why my nose sticks out so much, because I played with it so much. But in essence, someone had to give me feedback and say, when you're thinking, you play with your nose. And now I try not to play with my nose as a result of that. So it's just asking for feedback and being bold enough to do so.
Amazing. And I'm definitely with you in that I do not enjoy hearing the sound of my own voice in any type of recording. It's never an enjoyable thing. So we have gone past 8 p.m. and that is all that we have time for this evening. Thank you so much to each of our panelists. I think we've had a fantastic conversation, and thank you so much for your time. It's been great to draw upon your expertise.
Thank you for having us, Chloe, and thank you all for joining us.
No problem.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, all.
Thank you. And before everybody heads off, just wanted to say that we've got our contact details on the screen here. If you are interested in the incredible opportunities we have taking place this summer, do head over to our website at www.investin.org. Please do also send us an email to info@investin.org if you've got any questions. You can also email me directly at chloe@investin.org. I'll be very happy to help. Do complete the feedback survey. It is still live. It'd be great to hear from you. Another thing to note is we do have another free webinar for parents in June. This is titled Success in the City, and here we're going to be looking at landing top jobs in law, finance, consultancy, business, and more. Definitely not one to miss. Now, I hope that everybody has a great rest of their evening. Thank you so much for coming, and take care.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.